Hi, I'm Norman Spencer, the July Artist in Residence here at the South Central Regional Library, and I'm here to show you how to make a linocut block. First things first, you probably don't have to worry about this because you'll have either a new set of tools or just make sure you pre-sharpen your tools, but I always hone my tools before I start with a new block. And it's a basic process. Takes about 5 minutes. You just chalk the back of your block and then you hone the bottom part of your tool. This is the V tool, so I'm using the bottom part that actually carves into the linoleum. And this is just taking any little pieces of metal or anything that may have come off of the carving tool. This is the other side of it's called a slip stroke, but there's other names for it depending on the brand you get. But yeah, it has different grooves for like all the tools. So these are for like your different U-shaped tools here, if you can see. And these are for your V-shaped tools, like your small V and then like a larger V, and then like all your U's. And then the back is just like a leathery type material that just is a good sander type thing. And then I'll turn it around and I'll do it to the inside of the V, just to make sure that there's nothing messing with the blade. Yeah, so we're all honed. After you hone your tools, you'll deal with your image on your linoleum. Start with my image, then I have some transfer paper, which is what I use to put my image onto the linoleum, whether it's drawn or if it's printed. I cut it into the same size as my image so that it's just easy to put on. I'm gonna put it into like a obscure corner of the linoleum so that I can use the rest of the linoleum just to mess around with my tools and get a feel for the lines and the shapes that they can create. Just put the transfer paper onto the linoleum, put the image on top, and then I tape it down. And just do a quick you don't have to be exact because once you're carving, your image will change even more. It's kind of a thing that I like about it also is how much the image changes from like the basic sketch to when you're transferring it is different, and then when you actually carve it in, it changes even more. You can also take this time to think about the image that you want to produce, like as far as if you wanted a solid image like this, or if you wanted something to where the plant was the opposite way, to where the plant was clear space and everything else was outside. Just like basic composition things. There's a saying in printmaking where you measure twice and you cut once. So it's always good to just think about what you're going to do even before you do it. So once you have your image transferred, you're ready to take off your taped piece, and you'll have your image onto your linoleum, something like this. Let's start carving. Well, actually, first, before we start carving, let's go over the different tools that I have that you'll be using next week or beforehand if you wanted to get more comfortable with your tools. This is the V. It's like a medium V. You can use it to make really small lines like that. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a pretty small line. Or really large lines. You can use it to make different shapes. The number one rule of printmaking is to always cut away from yourself. As you do it more, you'll find yourself slipping up and breaking that rule a lot, and most of the time when you do it, you'll end up with some pretty deep cuts. And for some reason, cuts from these tools tend to bleed more than others, so it can get pretty messy pretty fast. But just a basic rule to go by is to always cut away from yourself. You may see me break that rule a few times, but hopefully I don't have to bring out the Band-Aids. The other tool that you'll be using is this large U, which is used to take out large pieces of linoleum, like not necessarily make details, but to just, when you have large open spaces like these here, or this background here, was using this just to, and this is some of the tools that it uses. So it takes out large areas of linoleum. But you can also use it to take out even smaller. It just depends on the amount of pressure that you use. There's a smaller U that I use sometimes as well that just offers a bit more control if you wanted to take out area around a detailed spot without worrying about the other pieces around it. You would use this small U. But yeah, if you have these tools, if you're taking the class next week, the live printing, if you want to mess around with the shapes that these make, feel free just to get a little bit more experience and just feel a little bit more comfortable with them in your hands. With printmaking, that's pretty much the biggest obstacle, other than just getting a natural feel for it, is just getting used to the tools and not necessarily being afraid of them. Because it is something different. It's not like drawing with a pencil or painting with a brush. You're carving something into an image. I'm going to carve out this piece. Most of the time, I'll start at the inside out, because if you start at the outside in, you can I don't know, the linoleum feels weaker. So I start where it's strong in the middle and then work out. The more you do it, the more you'll get a feel for the size of the lines that you're making, so that you can create different shapes. And as you see, I'm cutting away from myself, using a forward motion to propel the blade forward. And remember, everything that you carve away is going to show up as negative space, or as like the color of your paper. It isn't going to get inked. So keep that in mind. Think about that as you're transferring the image over. Think about what you want inked and what you don't. If you start carving and you become curious about the image that you're making, and you want to get an idea of what it looks like, you can take a rubbing of it. So just place a piece of paper over it, and then just use a pencil and just rub over the paper, and you'll see the lines that you're creating. Also, you don't necessarily have to go as fast as I am. It's all about just a matter of how comfortable you are with the tools. If you find the block moving like outside of your control and it's slipping, just use another hand to hold it down. And you can also use that hand to turn it around and carve different curves and things like that while the blade is still in the block. It's important not to rush yourself. These are basically exercises in patience. So just take it slow. This is a pretty quick piece, but sometimes you can carve for hours and end up making a simple mistake. And instead of letting it get you down, just like kind of roll with it. Maybe try to find a way to incorporate it into into the final design. And like I said, your image is going to change. It's not going to be exactly as your transfer image is. It's going to change slightly, just like your transfer wasn't exactly like your sketch. If your tools weren't sharp, you wouldn't be able to, your lines wouldn't be as sharp as they are. Your tool would start to drag linoleum with it and cause a lot of friction, and would cause little jaggeds in your lines, which could catch ink. And it's also easier on your hands when they're sharp. They just kind of glide through. If you have an older piece of linoleum, like this is pretty young and very like pliable, but if you have an older piece of linoleum and it's a little harder, you can take an iron or just like the bottom of a teacup or something and just place it on and rub it, and the warmth will soften it up. When I was younger, just starting out doing this, it didn't really bother my hands, but now I use those tips sometimes to soften the block. And I definitely make sure that my tools are sharp. For large shapes, I'll do an outline first, and then I'll take out the excess on the inside. Do whatever works for you. There are different types of linoleum. This is a battleship gray, and it's just semi-hard. There's some easy carve linoleums that are a little lighter gray than this, but they're basically like rubber and they just carve very easily. There's some like a golden yellow colored linoleum that's a little bit harder than this. But basically the hardness of it dictates like the crispness of the line and how easy it is to carve. Like the softer the linoleum, the blade moves easy, so it's a lot harder to control. So it works better for like large block images, whereas the harder linoleum works better for detail because you can just carve little lines into it and like actually control the blade better. And then I'll do the outside of my image. I did all that with the V tool, and then I'll use the large U tool to take away the outside of that image. And then I'll cut it out. So here's the finished product. If you want to do one of these on your own before the workshop, feel free, just to get a little exercise and to get a bit more experience with the tools. But we'll also be inking these and creating our own prints so that you can keep them and have them to show off to your friends. All that will be covered on my Zoom workshop on July 29th. And thank you guys for tuning in.